Brad Pitt. To millions, his name is not just a label, but a symbol. A symbol of charisma, of timeless beauty, of effortless success. For decades, his face has been plastered on billboards, his name headlined in bold, his life dissected in endless articles. But when we strip away the shine, when we step into the shadows of his story, we uncover something far more unsettling. Because Brad Pitt's path through Hollywood has never been simply about glamour. It has been about survival. And survival in this world is not for the faint of heart. William Bradley Pitt was born in Shawnee, Oklahoma in 1963 and raised in Springfield, Missouri. His childhood was shaped by the rhythms of small-town America. Conservative values, Baptist church services, and a sense of duty that pressed down on him like an invisible hand. On the surface, it was ordinary, but inside, Brad carried an ambition too large for his surroundings. He dreamed of more than Sunday sermons and suburban predictability. He dreamed of lights, cameras, and a life that could never fit within the walls of his hometown. That hunger carried him to Los Angeles, where dreams either flourish or collapse. With little money and no guarantees, he worked odd jobs just to survive. At one point, he stood outside El Pollo Loco dressed in a giant chicken suit, waving people into a restaurant. For some, it would have been humiliating. For Brad, it was simply a step, one rung on the ladder towards something greater. And though he was patient, Hollywood was merciless. The city swallowed thousands of hopefuls every year, spitting them back into obscurity. But Pitt's fire burned differently. His time was coming. It arrived in 1991, with a role so small, it should have been forgettable. In Thelma and Louise, he played a charming drifter, a hitchhiker who seduces Gina Davis' character before robbing her blind. It was less than 15 minutes of screen time, but it was enough. The camera adored him. The world noticed him. Overnight, Brad Pitt became more than another struggling actor. He became the face of a new generation of Hollywood stars. Beautiful, magnetic, untouchable. Or so it seemed. The rise that followed was meteoric. Films like A River Runs Through It, Legends of the Fall, and Interview with the Vampire cemented him as both a romantic idol and a serious actor. His presence was electric. Audiences didn't just watch Brad Pitt. They obsessed over him. He was adored, envied, desired. But fame, as always, carries its own poison. And in the background, the shadows began to stir. Hollywood thrives on perfection. Every red carpet smile, every interview answer, every carefully chosen role becomes another piece in the puzzle of image. For Pitt, that image was golden. Yet no human being can live as an image forever. Behind the flawless exterior, cracks were forming. Stardom wasn't freedom. Stardom was a cage. The more he shone in public, the more suffocating his private world became. Relationships became part of the spectacle. His marriage to Jennifer Aniston was treated like America as fairy tale romance. The golden boy with the golden girl. But fairy tales do not thrive under the glare of flashing cameras and relentless headlines. Every touch, every glance, every rumor was magnified until their marriage collapsed under the weight of public obsession. The aftermath was not quiet reflection, but a circus. And when Pitt's relationship with Angelina Jolie began, the frenzy only grew louder, darker, more intense. Together they became Brangelina, a super couple whose very existence was a global phenomenon. But the brighter the spotlight, the deeper the shadows. Fame doesn't just intrude on life, it consumes it. For Pitt, the intrusion became endless. Paparazzi hiding in bushes, helicopters flying over his home, tabloids inventing scandals when reality wasn't enough. He was no longer simply Brad Pitt, the man. He was Brad Pitt, the story. And in this city of illusions, being a story is far more dangerous than being a person. But perhaps the most haunting shadows were not outside him. but within. Even as his career reached unimaginable heights, Pitt wrestled with inner battles few could see. Addiction became a quiet companion. Alcohol dulled the chaos but created new storms. Self-doubt lingered behind every achievement. For every box office success, there were nights of silence, nights where the applause faded, where the man behind the mask had to confront himself. And what he found was not always easy to face. Hollywood has always been a place where light and darkness dance together. It promises immortality, but it demands sacrifice. For Brad Pitt, that sacrifice was steep. The boy who once dreamed of freedom now lived in a prison made of flashbulbs and expectations. And though the world adored him, behind the curtain he carried scars invisible to the eye. The terror wasn't in the scandals, the rumors, or the failures. The terror was in realizing how quickly success can turn into isolation, how beauty can become burden, how fame can devour the very soul it promised to uplift. Brad Pitt's story in these years was not simply one of triumph, but of survival. Because every smile he gave to the cameras hid the weight of the cage. Every role he played on screen blurred with the roles he was forced to play off it. And every step he took deeper into fame carried him further into the shadows. And this is where the question sharpens into something chilling. Could he ever escape the machine that created him? Or was Brad Pitt destined to be another star consumed by the very light that made him shine? Before we move forward, before we uncover the redemption and the transformation, I'll ask you this. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Are you ready to see not just the star, but the man, the battles he faced, the demons he confronted, and the way he redefined his story? If you are, then stay with us. Because the shadows of Brad Pitt's life are about to reveal secrets darker and ultimately more inspiring than you ever imagined. For most of Hollywood's tragic tales, this is the point where the curtain falls. The fame that once elevated a star becomes the very thing that destroys them. Addiction consumes, marriages collapse, and careers fade into whispers. But Brad Pitt's story refuses to follow that script. Instead, his journey takes a turn that few expected. A turn toward resilience, toward redemption, toward light. In the years after his marriage to Angelina Jolie dissolved, Pitt's life appeared to be unraveling. Tabloids feasted on the separation. Headlines screamed about custody battles, about broken trust, about alleged conflicts. The family that once seemed untouchable became fuel for gossip. For Pitt, these moments were not just public humiliation. They were personal devastation. He faced the possibility of losing not just the woman he had built a life with, but also his children, the very core of his world. But in this darkness, something extraordinary happened. Instead of hiding, Pitt confronted himself. He admitted, openly and without performance, that he had struggled with alcohol. He confessed to the chaos it had caused. In a world where stars often hide behind polished statements and carefully written scripts, Pitt chose vulnerability. He spoke about therapy. He spoke about facing pain head-on. And in doing so, he showed the world something far more powerful than perfection. He showed humanity. This choice to step out of the shadows did not just save him, it reshaped him. While many expected his career to falter under the weight of scandal, he began to climb once more, not as the invincible heartthrob, but as a man who had lived, fallen, and chosen to rise again. Through his production company, Plan B Entertainment, Pitt began to influence cinema in ways that reached beyond his own image. He produced 12 Years a Slave, a film that forced audiences to reckon with the brutal legacy of slavery, and which went on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. He backed The Big Short, a sharp critique of the financial crisis, exposing the greed that nearly destroyed the world's economy. And he supported Moonlight, a groundbreaking film about identity, love, and survival, which won Best Picture in 2017. These were not easy stories. They were not glamorous blockbusters or simple crowd pleasers. They were difficult, challenging, raw. And yet Brad Pitt put his weight behind them, proving that his purpose was no longer just to be seen, but to make others see. And then, in 2019, his career came full circle. In Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Pitt played Cliff Booth, a stuntman with a weathered past and a quiet strength. It was a role that mirrored his own life. A man who had stood in the shadows, who had endured loss, who had survived storms and found dignity in persistence. For this performance, Pitt won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. But more than the golden statue, it was the speech that mattered. Standing before the world, he spoke with gratitude, humility, and a quiet recognition that he had come through fire to stand there. It was not the victory of a flawless man. It was the victory of a man who had embraced his flaws and transformed them into strength. What makes this tale so haunting is not the scandals, not the divorces, not the addictions. What makes it haunting is the reminder that behind every polished smile lies a story we may never fully see. That the stars we idolize are human beings, carrying battles in silence, often hidden by the very light we think makes them untouchable. For Brad Pitt, the terror was real, the terror of losing himself, of watching his life unravel, of standing face to face with his own demons. But what makes his story inspiring is that he did not let the terror win. He rebuilt himself, slowly, painfully, honestly, and in doing so, he became more than an idol. He became a symbol of resilience. Today, when audiences look at Brad Pitt, they no longer see just the perfect face from Legends of the Fall or the rebellious fighter from Fight Club. They see a man who has lived through the shadows of Hollywood and found his way back into the light. They see a father who continues to fight for his children, an artist who uses his influence for good, and a human being who dares to admit that he is imperfect, and that imperfection is not weakness, but strength. And that is the real lesson hidden inside this tale. Fame will always cast shadows. The world will always hunger for stories of downfall, for whispers of scandal, for the cracks in every golden mask. But what matters is not how deep the shadows go. What matters is how you choose to walk through them. Brad Pitt's journey is terrifying because it reminds us of how fragile even the brightest lives can be. But it is uplifting because it shows us that fragility is not the end. That strength is born not in never falling, but in rising after the fall. That even in the darkest corners of Hollywood, redemption is possible. And maybe that is the story we all need to remember. That no matter what cage holds us, no matter what demons haunt us, no matter how deep the shadows reach, we can choose to step forward. We can confront our truth. We can rebuild. So the next time you see Brad Pitt on screen, remember, you are not looking at a flawless god of cinema. You are looking at a man who has been through storms, who has faced his shadows, and who still chose to step into the light. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most powerful role he has ever played.